Welcome to Excel Magic Trick 778. Hey, if you want to download this workbook, click on the link below the video. You are not going to believe this video. This video is all about index and match, the most powerful lookup functions in Excel. They can do all sorts of things that VLOOKUP can't, for example. Hey, this video is actually going to be quite long, totally extensive. I've done lots of individual videos, even some somewhat comprehensive videos of index and match, but this one puts it all together. That means it's going to be long, like an hour long. If you click below the video, there's a description. If you open that up, it'll have this table of contents, and it will tell you the minute mark in the video where you can find these topics. Now, match and index, we're going to start with the match function. So I'm going over to the sheet called 1. Now, what does the match function do? Match function, if I'm here and say, hey, look up Joe, it'll look through here and say, hey, Joe is the second item. So this is what's called an exact match. And you got to, in the third argument, put a 0. So let's look at this. Match. Lookup value, I'm going to look up Joe. Comma, lookup array. This is going to be a one-way array, whether vertical like this or horizontal. I'm going to highlight this. I'm going to hit the F4 key to lock that range. Lookup array, comma, and then match type. We're going to say 0 for exact match. That means this doesn't have to be sorted. Now, it will look up and give us 2 because the relative position of Joe in the list is 2. Now, let's copy this over and talk about the different situations that you can run into. I'm going to copy this over just to here. Now, only one in list. Well, it's going to return a 2. But what if we have dupes? This formula right here is looking up Tom. Oh, there's 2 of them. No problem. Match will return only the relative position of the first item. Now, that'll come in handy in some of our more advanced formulas, knowing that duplicates, it finds only the first one. What if it's not in the list? Well, it's going to give us an NA for not available. Now, sometimes this is just what you want. We'll see an example of this also. You're, in essence, saying with NA, I look this up, and this item is not in this list. Finally, match can do vertical or horizontal, which makes it pretty spectacular as a lookup function. For example, vertical VLOOKUP can only do vertical. So I'm going to look up Joe, comma, and I've orientated the table sideways. Control Shift right arrow, and then F4 key, comma, 0, close parentheses. So it can do vertical or horizontal. It's only finding what? Not really a row or a column. It's finding the relative position. So Joe is the second position in both the horizontal and vertical range. Now let's talk about match when you have the third argument 1. Now, this is often used for things like, hey, look up someone's income. Now, all match does is tell you the relative position, but later we'll use this exact trick for looking up a certain tax rate. But notice, there are, what distinguishes this table from the other, there are gaps. There are numbers between 0 and 100, which we would like to find. And we would like the relative position. For example, if it was 73, I want the relative position 1. Down here, if we're looking up, so yeah, this one's in between. So if we say look up 150, it will find a number in between here and know to go to this row or this relative position here. Now, a couple things about approximate match with a 1. The table has to be sorted in ascending order. Now, here's what it does. Equals, let's just see how to do it. Match, I'm going to say look up 150, comma, within this range right here, F4, comma. Now, we could put 1, or if you know that the default is 1, you can leave it out. So I'm going to backspace, and I'm going to leave it out. Now, let's just think about this. Why did it return 2? Match, when doing an approximate match with the final argument, number 3 argument, equal to 1 or default, what does it do? It takes this 150, it keeps it in its brain, it goes racing through the list, and when it bumps into the first bigger value, it jumps back 1. That's why for this particular lookup value, it gives us 2. Now, you can imagine an income lookup situation. That's exactly what you want, because really, it's this category right here is $100 greater than or equal to 100, but less than 500. So that's why the metaphor of look this up, bump into the first bigger one, and jump back works really well. Now, let's copy this over and see what happens for fits into the gap. That means it can find a number in between. Exact value, no problem. This category here is, in essence, 100. Right? So that's how all these categories work. This is the same way that VLOOKUP works too. By the way, though, this match with approximate match with a 1 or left out is exactly like VLOOKUP. Right? So this number is included, but the next one is not. That's, of course, so we don't double count. If we had equal signs in both places, it wouldn't make any sense. All right? So it can find an exact match here. It says 2. If you give it a number smaller than the first one, again, the table has to be sorted. You go, it hits that one, and it goes, uh-oh, this number is bigger than. It just says not available. Bigger than the last one, no problem. For a lot of tax tables, it's anything greater. So the x value would be greater than or equal to this and whatever. So anything bigger gets this last category, as we can see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Finally, just as we saw before, match is totally amazing, because it can do vertical or horizontal. And I'm going to leave that last argument off. Actually, this one I'll put in a 1 to show you it does the same thing. I always like to type less, so if I'm doing this all the time, I just leave it out. And that, of course, gets 1, right? Jumps into the first bigger one. Now, let's see. This is the more common one. Whoops, sorry. 1 as the one or left out for this match type. But let's look at what -1 does. And really, this is the thing that can distinguish match from VLOOKUP. VLOOKUP can do an exact match or approximate match. But what VLOOKUP can't do is this. Now, this -1 in the third argument is when you have the table sorted descending. And then the logic is the same as 1 approximate match, except for you bump into the first smaller value and jump back 1. Now, this is a rare type of lookup, but it definitely does occur. So let's see how this works. Match. I'm looking up this, comma. I'll pick the vertical one, F4 to lock it, comma, and -1. Now, this says less than or greater than. And if you read help, it explains that. The way I like to think of it is the bump your head into metaphor, right? So I'm going to put -1. That means now I'm going to look up 1,500. And when I find the first value smaller than, I'm going to jump back 1. Right? So this should give us 3. It takes 1,500 in its brain, bump, goes there. It tells you relative position 3. Now I'll copy this over here. Of course, it can find an exact value. Right? So 2,500 is that. If it finds a bigger than first, remember up here, it was smaller than first. Looking up here. So here, when it finds a value bigger than this, it just goes not available. Smaller than the last item, no problem. It can go way past here. This category can be 0 or anything smaller. So it finds 7. And then, of course, the beauty of match. So awesome. It can do 3 types of lookups, and it can do horizontal or vertical. -1, close parentheses. So there it's finding, comes down here, runs into the first smaller value, and jumps back 1. So that's a lot of examples there. I said there was like 18 examples, but really that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 12. That was already 16 examples of match. Now, let's go look at what index does. I'm on the second sheet. Index does a lot of things. We're going to start off by looking at two-way lookup. Now, here we have a part ID. And I'm going to pick part 2 and a quantity. I'm going to type in 15. So what we do here is we have to come down here. We find part 2, and we go over. We know this is the row. Relative position 2, but the index will need to know that this is a row position. And then the two-way lookup, well, we have a variable here, too. So we go here, here. We bump into the first value bigger than, and we jump back 1. So we know this 15 should fit here. So it's this column number. So really, if we're looking this up, the row number is 2. But match will just treat it as a relative position. But we will have to put it into the right argument for index, row number. And for looking up this 15, it'll go 1, 2. Oh, that's the second column, or relative position 2. And this is the value that will be returned. So one of the main things that index can do is it can do two-way lookup. Now, there's lots of other things it can do, and we'll see this throughout the video. But the basics of is just that. So get this. We're going to do two matches. Match this, comma, within this vertical array, comma, 0. That's an exact match. It says 2. And then here, match, we're going to do look up this 15, comma, within this horizontal range. Totally awesome. I'm leaving the argument off because I'm doing an approximate match where I want to bump into the first bigger one. So there we have it. If I change this to 75, then I got this. By the way, I did this with conditional formatting. I have a video, if you search YouTube, conditional formatting, intersection of row and column. It'll show you how to do that. And then here is our index. Now, I'm going to do a little trick here. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to Control-CC. That opens up the clipboard. If you don't have that turned on as an option, then just come here and click this. So you can see that one match. That's for the part number. I'm going to come over here, and in edit mode, I'm going to copy. And so I have these two things. Remember, that's delivering a row number. No, this is the row number. This is the column number. So equals index. Index, there's two different types of index. The first and most common one is give me the array. And we'll see later that that array means you can also put actual arrays in here, and it will understand it. But for us, it's the table, the two-way table. Now, very important when you're doing index. This table, this array, includes the values only. Unlike VLOOKUP, where we include the first column. You do not do that with index. The columns, and the row headers and the column headers will be used inside of the match function to get us row and column. So the array, just the things. Now, this is a two-way, right? It's not just a one-way, it's a two-way. It's got a row position and a column position. Now, comma. The easy way to understand this is just to hard code it in, right? I want row 2. Comma, and then the column number is row 3. Now, you never do a formula like that, but that's the essence and really how simple index is when you're doing two-way lookup, right? And it will return that 18%. But of course, we don't want to hard code this in, so this 2 really needs to be replaced with the match. And this illustrates the real power of match and index together, because we can do two-way lookup, which VLOOKUP can't, and match allows us to do 3 different types of lookup. So when I enter, that will work. Now, whatever I change here will change the lookup. All right, so it's returning 17%. All right, so you got it. Two-way lookup. Now, index and match can easily do one-way lookup. We'll first look at vertical. So match can do lookup with 2 vertical ranges. In addition, we'll see here how to look up left. Now, lookup left is hard for VLOOKUP to do. There is a weird type of formula where you mix it with choose function. But really, if you're doing left lookup, you should index is a great way to go. So I'm going to say index, the array, the things we're looking up. Oh, let me explain this first. Why would you ever want to do lookup left? Well, one reason is you're not allowed to put the lookup column as the head column. Here we have product, price, and description, right? So I have boomerang. Someone comes into the store. They say they want a 50-meter boomerang. So I want to look up the actual name of the boomerang. So this is an example of where you'd want to do lookup left with 2 vertical ranges. So the array, it is going to be the actual values to look up. And those are vertical, comma. And the row number, well, here we have to do match. And the value we're looking up is that, comma. In this vertical array, it is exact, so comma 0. Close parentheses, close parentheses. And that is beautiful. We could do a one-way lookup with 2 vertical ranges, also doing lookup left. So now when I say 50 meter, I just say, hey, customer, you want this one right here. You want a 160. There's only a few people in the world that can throw 160 meters, but there are boomerangs for that. You better take boomerang 9. So that's lookup left and lookup two vertical ranges. Now let's look at our next example here. This is a one-way lookup with two horizontal ranges. Now one of the ranges will be a locked range, and one of them will be a relative range. Now here we have some vendors and some products, and we've gotten bids. So for product 4, we have a bid from vendor 1, vendor 2, vendor 3, vendor 4, vendor 5. Well, here's the smallest bid, and we just want to know which vendor it is. So I look up 32 in this range. It's 1 to the third relative position, and I'm going to tell the index that this is the lookup array. So I want to return vendor 3 to right here. Now I just did the min function here, right? You could do it in a separate column, or you could actually put it into the match function. All right, so ready? Here we go. Equals index. And I'm going to put in the array a horizontal range. And I'm going to lock it with the F4 key, comma, the row number, match. Now, wait a second. This right here says row number. Shouldn't I go comma and then put the column number in? It will work that way. But index is programmed once it sees an array, right? That's the items we're looking up. Once it sees one way, which means it only has one dimension, right? There's one row, multiple columns. All you have to do is put a number here. So even though it says row number, we're actually looking up a column, right? The third column in these values here, number 3. That's the column we want. So you'd think we want this, but it's programmed, this row number. If it's one way, you just put your relative position in row number. So I'm just going to do match. I'm looking up the low bid, comma, the lookup array. These are relative. As we copy the formula down, we want the dancing ants to move, but the array that we're looking at values in needs to be locked. And this has to be an exact match because these numbers are not sorted. Now, we could run into a situation where there's a duplicate here. And we saw earlier match with exact match. We'll only find the first one. Now, there's a few ways you could do this. You could do an advanced array formula to extract multiple records when there are duplicates. Or you could simply add conditional formatting here. Again, I have other videos on conditional formatting anyway, you do conditional formatting for duplicate. So I copy this down. And sure enough, if I edit my formula and look, sure enough, this purple range here is moving down as the formula goes down. But the actual values in the array that we're looking up is locked. So that's a great way to use index. Notice there are two horizontal ranges. Our next example, example 5. This is a rarer occurrence, but it does occur from time to time. Index and match have no problem looking up a value in a vertical range and returning something from a horizontal range. So I'm going to say equals index. Remember, the array here is always the things you want to return. I want to return boomerang. I'm going to click on that cell, Control-Shift, right arrow, and then scroll back. We're not copying these anywhere here, so we don't need to lock them, comma, and then row number. Remember, it's a one-dimensional array. It's a one-way lookup. So we only have to put a relative position into row number. So I'm just going to say match. And I'm looking up this, comma, in this. These have to obviously be the same size. And it's an exact match. And then we control enter or control enter, and we get boom 3. So if I say, hey, this person wants a 20-meter boom, that will be boom 2. 10-meter, that's boom 1. So this is just an example of this was where we got our match, which was vertical, and this is where we got our return value, which was horizontal. All right, our next example, we're going to come over here and we're going to see the -1 example. Let's click in B5 and hit delete. And actually, let's close this too. All right, so here we have a two-way lookup. We have selected rainfall and pipe size. And from that, those two inputs, we want to figure out the square footage that this pipe will handle. So, and for whatever reason, this is sorted this way, and we're not allowed to change it. No problem. Match can come to the rescue, because here we have sorted in descending order. We put that in. It bumps into the first smallest, which is 11, right, and jumps back to a 12-inch pipe, which would be fine. If 11 can handle it, then certainly 12 can. So we're going to do, we have a two-way lookup. So it's equals index, the array. Remember, when you're doing two-way lookup, you highlight just the values that are potentially can be returned to the cell, not the column headers or row headers, comma, the row number. Well, that's going to be this row headers, right? Match. And I'm going to look up the actual pipe size, comma, comma, and then -1. And then our next match, we'll be looking up this. Now, we could do this one of two ways. Well, comma, and the lookup array will be this horizontal. We could just leave the default noticing that the numbers are sorted from smallest to biggest. You also could do exact if you wanted, but I'm going to leave it like that. The default is approximate match when the table is sorted from smallest to biggest, ascending. I'm going to close parentheses. There's our column number, and then enter. So if I change this to 13, you can see it should go to this one, and then 4 inches, so it should be over here. If I change this to 2 and change this to 5, then we should get, here's a 5 and there's a 2. All right, so we can definitely have the -1 when we're bumping into a smaller value and jumping back one. Our next example, we want to see how to use index and match to look up not an intersection of a column and row, but actually look up a whole column. Or in our next example, we'll see how to look up a whole row. Now, this is important sometimes when you have some data and you just want to add either January, February, March. And you want to be able to change this to February and have the total update. Now, the index can easily look up a whole column instead of just an intersecting value. So equals index. The array is going to be this, comma. And here's the trick. If you're looking up, so right now, we want to look up February, and we want this. Well, notice there is a column. It's column 1, 2. And there is a bunch of rows, all the rows. So when you get to row argument, if you want all the rows, you either put a 0 or leave it blank. I'm going to leave it blank, comma. So it says 0 or empty. So I just left it empty, comma. Now the column number, we have to do a match there. And I'm looking up this, comma, within this, comma. And this is, I'm going to use an exact because we have words and they're not sorted potentially in the right order. They're not, because M comes before A. By the way, if you had words and they were sorted perfectly, you could use approximate match. But approximate match means there's potentially values in between, and there's not any values in between. So I like to keep it as a 0 for exact match. It's that right there. Now, if I hit enter, it doesn't know what to do because it has 4, 4, 4. It doesn't know how to display 4 values in a cell. So we have to put it inside a sum function. But watch this. You can prove to yourself that it's actually looking up all the rows. Highlight it and hit the F9 key. The F9 key evaluates. You can see it, in fact, is returning 4 rows. Semicolon in array syntax. This is array syntax. Curly brackets contain the array. Semicolons mean rows. Columns mean commas. So if this were displayed across the columns, it would be a comma. So this is row. It goes down to the next row. All right, Control Z. You don't want to F9 and leave it there. Undo is Control Z, and then sum. You need to put it inside of a. Whoops. I just clicked there by accident and put that there. I'm going to Control Z. Control Z only works for the last action when you're in edit mode. Very carefully click out here, close parentheses. And you don't need Control Shift Enter, just enter. Now let's test it. And sure enough, it's looking up the whole column. Now you can imagine that how do we do this for rows equals in sum index. I'm going to highlight the whole range. And comma, we actually need a row number here because we're looking up the row and we want to return all the columns. So the row number is going to be match. And I'm looking up January, comma, within this range. That match will return the relative position, comma 0 for exact. And then there's the row number. You got to be sure and type a comma, get to the columns, and 0 or empty means give me all the columns. So it would give me those 3 columns. I'm going to highlight this and F9 it. Just that part, F9, you can see it shows commas. The way I remember array syntax is comma starts with a C, and columns start with a C. Control Z, close parentheses, and enter. So there we have 5. If we change it to February, boom. All right, now our next example. So we can look up whole columns or whole rows. Our next example, you're not going to believe this. Index and match can actually look up a cell reference. Now, what in the world? Well, looking up cell references sometimes can be handy when you're doing dynamic ranges. For example, I have some data here, and I want to make a chart, but I don't want to have all these blanks here showing up in the chart. So I want a dynamic range. Right now, the chart should look here, but when I add a new value down here or here, I want it to expand automatically. So that's where dynamic ranges come in. And what are we going to do? We're going to look up a cell reference. So right now, for all of this range, we're always going to have the first cell reference equal A11, right? But sometimes the last range cell reference in the range will be A18 or A19 or A20. So we're actually going to have to look up the last value. It'll be easy. The relative position, we can simply use the count function because dates are serial numbers, are actual numbers. So we can use count, which counts numbers, and say how many are here. It will say how many are there. There's 8, but that'll be perfect for finding the relative position of the last item. All right, so let's see how to force index to look up a cell reference. Let's just see how cell references work. It knows, ranges works. A cell reference, A11, and then there's a colon, and then another cell reference. That colon is what is going to be the trigger to tell index, I am looking up not a value, but a cell reference. Now here's the way. I'm going to highlight this right here and hit delete. Notice there's a cell reference and a colon. Now we're going to put the index here. And the fact that the index is preceded by a colon and a cell reference, the index is instructed to look up the actual cell reference instead of the value. All right, so looking up the array. Now, there's a couple ways you can do it. Some people highlight the whole column like this. Some people highlight a bunch of cells, but they just make sure that they go way below where any data is ever going to go. Now, for the video, I'm only highlighting these. I only highlighted 4 cells more, but you might highlight 100 more or 200 or however many the maximum number. So there it is right there. I'm actually going to hit the F4 key. I'm going to come back here and hit the F4 key. We're going to need those locked later for our dynamic range. Now, comma. Row number, well, these are numbers, and I'm anticipating that we won't have any blanks. So I'm simply going to use count. And I'm going to use the same range as here. Exact same range, so it will always count. And count will just give us 8, which is exactly the relative position of the last one. There's the row number, close parentheses. We don't need a column number. And watch this. If you highlight just the index, not the colon or the other cell reference, and hit F9, notice it's actually returning the value. That is a serial number there. That's a date format on top of that serial number. So it's actually looking up. What? I thought I just said it looks up a cell reference. Well, Control Z, you actually have to highlight all of this because it was evaluated without the semicolon. When it's evaluated with the semicolon, it knows to look up the cell reference. Now I'm going to hit F9 here, and you see that it returns all the values. So the F9 key trick to evaluate doesn't show exactly that it looks up the cell reference, but you could see it's given us all the values. Control Z. I'm going to enter this with Control Shift Enter because it's returning a bunch of values. And then I'm going to type something down here. Now I'm going to come up here, highlight, and F9. You can see, sure enough, it's expanded by 1 and has that. So the dynamic range is working. Now once I Control Z, F9 here, I can Control Z, or I can go back to the previously stored formula by hitting Escape. Now I want to show you one other way to prove that it actually is looking up the cell reference. Click on the cell, go up to Formulas and Evaluate Formula. The keyboard shortcut is Alt-TUF. Alt-TUF, tough. Now underline, I'm going to click Evaluate. Underline, you can see that's the index, and it's looking up. What is it looking up? A18. That's a cell reference it's looking up. I'm going to click Close. Now I'm going to copy this right here. Escape. Edit mode, Control V. Now there's a few ways we could, oops, I forgot the equal sign. There's a few ways we can do that. We want the, oh, I did it backwards. Oh, no, I got it right. This is sales, so we want this one. So I'm going to change all these to B. B. And then Control Shift Enter. Now, how are we going to get these to as dynamic ranges into our chart? I'm going to use the defined name feature. So I'm going to highlight this first one for date, Control C in edit mode, Escape, Name Manager, or the keyboard shortcut Control F3. New, notice I already have some there because there's the answer here. New. By the way, there's a lot of notes in this workbook if you download it. The name, I'm going to call it date. And then I'm going to say down here, you've got to be kidding me, refers to. Defined names can not only look at a particular range, but they can also look at formulas, any formula. So I'm going to paste. Now I'm going to highlight this. There it is right there. I'm going to click OK. Now I'm going to test it. And the way you test it is I'm going to click on that right there. And sure enough, you can see, oh, it is working. Look at that. That's a cool way to test defined names. All right, I'm going to click Close. I'm going to come here, scoop it out in essence, copy it in edit mode, Control C, Escape, Control F3, New. It's got the word sales. How did it get that? Oh, because it's thinking that I want that word right there. Control V, OK. Click this collapse button. Sure enough, it looks like it's looking all right. Click Close. Now we want to create a chart. And I'm just going to create a chart by highlighting that. Insert, and you can pick whichever chart. I'm going to click Column. Now there is a keyboard shortcut for the default chart. Excuse me. The keyboard shortcut is Alt F1. I'm going to point to the edge and make it a little bit smaller. Now the key to charts, I'm going to click there and delete, with dynamic ranges, is we need to, I'm going to delete. I'm going to click here and delete just so I get it. All we're doing is seeing that it's dynamic. If I click on this, these columns right here, you can see there's a series function here. And this series function is looking at all the range here. That's why when you change the data, the series function picks it up and displays it in the chart. But I'm going to go up to the Chart Tools, Design, and Select Data. This is really the power of charts because you can do all sorts of things, add, edit. I'm going to click on Sales and Edit. Now here's the weird trick. Down in Series Values, you have to highlight very carefully the cell references, but leave the sheet reference part. Now I'm going to type the name sales or hit F3 because I forgot them and double click. So what I've done is I've replaced the cell references with the name, leaving the sheet reference. When I click OK, now watch this. When I click back here and say edit, it puts the workbook name in. So it's a weird kind of double step there. You have to highlight the cell, paste the name, click OK, and the next time you look at it, it will show you the workbook and name, which you can see the workbook up there, and the sales. Click OK. I'm going to do the same thing over here. Edit, highlight the cells, F3, double-click date, click OK. Click Edit. You can see workbook name. Click OK, click OK. Now let's test it. I'm just going to copy this down. I have a formula there, and this will be 12. And sure enough, it added that extra value. Now the beauty of dynamic names as opposed to the table features, the table feature sometimes has a hard time with contracting ranges. But if I delete all these, the chart is still there. If I come here, right, that's a silly chart, but equals this plus 1 equals this plus 2. So now I can copy this down, right? And so as I copy it down each day or add my new numbers, it just totally updates that. It's just totally amazing, totally amazing. So this is 2. So absolutely beautiful. And one of the advantages of using the index to look up a cell reference as opposed to the offset, because offset function is specifically built to do dynamic ranges, create ranges. Offset is volatile, so anytime the sheet is recalculated, offset recalculates. And so index avoids some of that trouble. Now, there are some dynamic range problems that offset can do that index can't. But in this case, I love this, being able to look up a cell reference to create a dynamic range. All right, in our next example, we're going to go over to sheet 1112. Now, example 11 and 12, we want to see how to use index when we have to look up from multiple tables. Now, here's a product we sold and the sales. Product 3, a different product, and the sales. The thing is, we need to calculate our discount. But each one of these tables, product 1, product 2, we have different tables for different products. So this is a situation where you have different lookup tables. Now the first key, we're going to see how to do this with index. But then I'm going to show you how to do it with choose. Now, I normally would just switch over to choose because it's more versatile. But this is a video that shows you everything about index and match, so I have to show you this option. Now, no matter what you do, whether you use index or choose to calculate your discount from multiple tables, you have to give each one, either index or choose, a table number. This is going to be table 1, 2, 3. So you can either add an extra column or put whatever we're going to put here inside of the larger formula. But either method has to have either a 1, 2, 3, some integer to say which table you're looking up. So I'm going to add an extra column here and use VLOOKUP. Now the lookup value I'm going to look up, well, I want to look up, well, wait a second. Before I even did this, I just thought in advance, I have all these products, so I made a little table down here. Here's our 3 products, table 1, 2, 3. Those are the integers that will tell our lookup function which table to look up the item in. So I'm going to look up this. Remember, this column is to just give us a number, comma, and the table array, this. Look it up here and tell me which table I need. F4 to lock it, comma. The second column has the number we're returning to the cell, comma. And this is true or false, exact or approximate. In match, this would be 1. This would be 0. Guess what? I never put true or false. This is exact, so I'm putting 0. All the years I've been doing it, I never had any trouble with that. I put a 0 for exact match, or I leave it off for approximate match because that's the default. All right, all VLOOKUP's going to do is tell us which table. Now we can do our lookup with index and match, looking up from multiple tables. This will be a formula input into our formula that says which table equals index. Now, normally we use this one up here, but that's what this one down here is for. Reference, that means all the tables, row, column, if you're doing two-way lookup, and the area number. That's which table you want. Now, the limitation to the index method is that says reference. What it means is the tables, our formula is right here. But all of these tables have to be on this sheet, and they have to be references, not arrays. So now, how are we going to put 3 tables? reference, you got to type in open parentheses. And then you could put as many tables as you want separated by columns. Actually, we want just this column right here. Every single one of these references are just going to be the actual discount amounts. We're doing a one-way lookup in essence. I'm going to hit F4, comma, and then this one, F4, comma, and then this one down here, F4 and comma. No, that's 1, 2, 3, so no comma, close parentheses. Now, the order is important. So this is 1, 2, 3. The order in which you put them in will determine which area number you want. All right, now I'm going to put a comma and row number. Now we need a row number. So each one of these, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, we need a row number. So I'm going to use the match. And we're going to look up the actual sales amount. And that's a relative cell reference, comma. And now I'm going to highlight this. This is a one-way. And again, the numbers here have to be exactly the same in all the tables. So I'm going to hit F4. I could have put this off to the side or I didn't even have to have these repeated down here. I could have had this over here or this over here also. I set this up because in my next example, I'm going to use choose and VLOOKUP. Now, so that's the lookup array, comma, and we're doing an approximate. So I'm going to leave it off. That's this 1. You can either put 1 or, knowing that it's the default, just leave it off. So close parentheses. That's our row number. So we type a comma. We don't need a column number, but I do need this area number. So I'm going to click right there. And that's a relative cell reference. Close parentheses, Control Enter, and double click and send it down. Now let's do some checking. So 9,000 on table 3. So I come down here. It's hitting bigger than the last one, so it's 1.5. And sure enough, that is. Table 1. So we have an 8,000. Table 1, we have a 2,000. So we bump into the first bigger value. So it should be 2. So it looks like it's working. That's just absolutely amazing. Now, if you wanted, I'm going to put this in edit mode and Control C. Actually, I'm going to clear, Control C, escape. I'm going to highlight this VLOOKUP, Control C. I have the VLOOKUP right there, escape. And I could just come over here and in this column, I guess I will put it right there. I could put this. I clicked on that. And this formula is looking at that orange cell right there. So I could simply double click that and replace it with the VLOOKUP. And then Control Enter and copy it down. And so ultimately, that's what usually people do. They don't have an extra column like this, right? So if I were to delete this, this one doesn't work, but you could see that this one does just fine. Now I'm going to Control Z. Now actually, for both of these, if we're calculating not our discount percentage, but our discount amount, let me close this. You'd come over here and multiply this times that. So it's doing a lookup. Not only is it looking up the table number, right? Or no, I don't have that here. It's just F2. There's the table. It's doing a lookup from multiple tables, returning the 2% to this formula, and then multiplying it by that. And so we get our discount. You could do the same thing over here. Now, I'm going to show you how to use choose. I like choose better because you can and by the way, let's just look at one last thing before we switch over. If I had a two-way lookup, and both the row headers and the column headers were different, right? In this case, we have a one-way lookup, and the row headers, the value we're looking up to figure out relative position, are all the same. But if they were different, and these were different, you would actually have to put use this and use the choose function here. So that's one of the reasons I never ever use this index reference. I just use choose function. The choose function has two advantages. It'll allow you to do two-way lookup when there's totally different labels, and your tables don't have to be on this sheet. They could be somewhere else. All right, let's see how to do this. I'm actually going to use VLOOKUP here. And the reason why is I have these tables set up. Now, I'm not going to change these numbers to be different, but imagine that they were, and this would work fine. You can try that for yourself. I'm going to do VLOOKUP. Now, ultimately, we are looking up this value right here. So comma. Now, table array. Now, here's the problem. We have 3 tables, right? But no problem. We can use the choose function. Now, the choose function, and I have lots of notes down here, is just awesome. It's going to have an index number, which is the same as the area number in index. It wants a 1, 2, 3, 4. But these values, you actually just put whatever you want right into the choose function separated by commas. The choose function can do anything. Cells, ranges, define names, formulas, text, all functions, anything you want can be put here. So this is really an amazing lookup function. So the index number, I'm going to click there. Comma, and now I simply put my ranges in. Now, imagine that these were on a different sheet, and you just do a sheet reference. You click on the sheet and then highlight them. All right? And I'm going to hit F4. Comma. Now, notice with the screen tip for choose, value 2, I get the next table, F4. Comma. On to value 3, I highlight the next one. So if you're on different sheets, you could use either sheet references or define names. So look at this. This choose right here, that's 3 tables right into the table array argument for VLOOKUP. Now, if you're using match and index, you would have to put this choose into the match and do a 2-way, in essence, lookup with the choosing the array, the 1-way array for the match. All right, so there's our table array, comma. It's always going to be returning from 2, so I put a 2. Comma. The lookup range by default is approximate sorted ascending, so I'm going to leave it off, backspace, close parentheses. And I double click and send it down. Now I'm going to multiply this times that to get my result. Double click and send it down. All right, so if you're doing multiple tables, I have other videos, a bunch of videos on that. Choose is the one I like the best. It's more versatile because you can have the tables on other sheets and these the actual lookup column, or if it's a 2-way column, the column headers and row headers do not have to be the same like index. All right, now let's go look at another example, 13. I want to see how to flip a table. Here's my situation. I have a lookup table. And for the report, it needs to show biggest to smallest. But I actually need it to function just like when I do lookup, I need it to function like it was sorted smallest to biggest, or ascending. So no problem. I have this. I'm going to use this to print out my report. Or I'm a teacher. I use this to put in the syllabus. But for VLOOKUP, I need to flip the table. It's no problem. We can use index and match. The only trick here is we're going to have to, as we copy index down, we'll say look up here. The first cell needs to have the number 6, because that's the 6th item. So in this cell, I need a 6. When I go down, when I copy the formula down, I need a 5, then a 4, then a 3. The way you do that is you use the rows function. The rows function, I'm sitting in, and well, actually, I'm going to highlight this whole range right here. A2 to A7. And I'm going to very carefully put my cursor in the A7, which is the last value. Now, what does rows do anyway? What's row, if it looks at 2 to 7, what does it see? It sees 6 rows. Well, if I lock this one, and I'm going to lock just the row reference, as I copy it down, the last one will be locked, but not the first one. So 2 will turn to 3. So it will give me 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Control Enter. Copy it down and over. Now notice, totally perfect. The cell references were intentional. There are no cell references there, just a single row reference there. But that's going to be our, in essence, row number or relative position. Now I simply put this inside of index. I'm going to highlight just this column, comma, no, F4, just lock the row references, because as I copy down, I want it locked. But when I copy this formula over, I need the dancing ants to move over. Comma, Very carefully close parentheses. VLOOKUP, there's the array, there's the row number. Control Enter, double click and send it down, and copy it over. So now I flip the table. And what's beautiful about this is I use this in the syllabus. I use this in VLOOKUP. If I come up and change this here to 445, boom, that changes down there. So again, the idea in Excel, everything that can change, you put it in one cell somewhere, and any other time you use it, you refer to it with a formula. I'm going to Control Z. I'm going to do VLOOKUP now, or index, or whatever you want. So VLOOKUP. I'm looking up, wow, 401. That's a pretty good score. Table array, comma 2. This is approximate match, sorted, ascending. And there is the decimal grade. Again, looks up, finds the first bigger one, boop, and jumps back one row. So that's flipping a table. Our next example, 14, I want to see how to look up the next bracket. Now here's the situation here. This isn't commission paid. This is amount. If only I could type. To get to next bracket. Wow. What do you mean get to next bracket? Well, I just made 55,000, and my current commission rate is 6%. But I want to know how many more sales. Oh, I'm sorry. This is here. This. Boom. So I'm bumping into there and jumping back there if I did a lookup, right? But really, what I want is I want how much I need to make it into the next bracket. So I can do this in my head, right? Equals this minus this. It's 4,455. Well, I somehow need to replace this cell A9 so that if I put any number here, it moves. Well, guess what? It's easy enough to do some sort of lookup with this value. But what would it give us? It'd race down. This is 5,500. Race down here, bump into the 10,000, and go back one row. Well, what do we want? Anytime, if we were going to use this as a lookup value, anytime we find a row, we want to add 1. Well, VLOOKUP can't do that, but index and match can. So I say index. This is the range I'm looking it up in, comma, the row number or relative position, match. Lookup value, I'm looking this up, comma, within this. And the match type is the default, so I'm leaving it off. And then that's a row number. Actually, I'm going to close parentheses on this just for a moment. That minus A3 is out there. But let's think about this. This row number, if I hit F9 to evaluate, 1, 2. Oh, that is so cool. So match delivers an integer that we can simply always add 1 to. And VLOOKUP, at least I don't know how to make VLOOKUP to do that. But match can do it no problem. And there it is. So if I change this to 37,500, it tells me exactly how much I need to increase my sales by to get to the next bracket. So that's just a great use of index and match. All right, number 15. We can select random names from a list. So when I select one name, there's a function called rand between. In 2007 and 10, it's automatically there. In earlier versions, you need to add the analysis tool pack, tools add-in, if I can even remember back that far now. I know many people still use 2003, but that was a long time ago. Rand between, there's just a bottom and a top. You say 1, 5. Well, how many names? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It'll randomly select between 1 and 5. F9, and it will randomly select. So guess what? That's going to be the relative position of the item in the list. So index, array, array is one way. So comma, no matter whether it's column or row, row number will just take the relative position. So and then F9 is evaluate. So I'm randomly selecting the name. Our next example, we'll go over to 16 and 17. This is a formula that can look up the first non-blank. But we're going to see an interesting thing about index. We're going to have to do an array formula here. An index can actually handle arrays without Control-Shift-Enter. So down here, that argument there says array, just like sum product says array. And lookup, or actually lookup doesn't fit that same. It's just it's a function from way back that actually can handle arrays. Those are three functions that handles array. But we're going to create an array formula, and we're going to use index cleverly to avoid Control-Shift-Enter. All right, let's start up here. Get first non-blank. Well, I'm going to use index. And it's always going to be this. Now, this formula right here, this kind of situation might be for a stock analyst, right? You're entering, let's say there were days up here, and you're entering stock values, right? And so you're always entering your first value on a different day, or you had sample data with times up here. So this is a common situation where you need to look up the first non-blank. So I want 1 here, 5 here, 13 here. All right, so I'm going to look up index in this range right here. The array is that, and it's relative. We'll copy this down. Comma, and then this is a one-way array, so we just want our relative position. Well, we're going to be clever here. We'll use match. Match, again, is that's not a built-in function. Sorry about that. Match the lookup value. Well, shoot, I don't know what to do here. Well, let's just think about down here, this one we can see. If we could ask the question, or in fact, let's do it this way. I'm going to skip over that for now. Lookup array. Now I'm going to create an array here, and we're going to have to use Control-Shift-Enter. If I could ask the question, is anything not blank in this range right here, I'd get a false, a true, a true, a true, false, false. Well, there's multiple trues, right? But if we get match, we say, hey, match, look up true, and say exact match, it'll look up the relative position of the first one. So let's first figure out how to do this. We simply highlight that same range, and we say, is anything in that not empty or not blank? The symbols for not are less than, greater than, and the symbol for blank is double quote. So let's just look at this and hit F9. All right, so false, true, because in the one, I know my formula is covering that up. But the first item occurs in the second position, meaning the first value we have there. So there's our array of trues and falses. Now this is an array. That's array syntax. There's a curly bracket there, and commas mean across the columns. I'm going to Control Z on that because I don't want to hard code that in. That is an array created in a formula, so we're going to have to use Control-Shift-Enter. Now I can come over here back to lookup value and just type true. That is so cool. Come over here, comma, and we definitely need exact match because we want to pick up the first true. Close parentheses. So let's just highlight this and hit the F9 key. Oh, 2. That's exactly what we want. Come to here. We got our relative position in the row number argument, so close parentheses and enter. It's going to give us a value error because we didn't. This is an array formula. This little piece right here requires that we is an array. It means that our formula is an array formula, which means we have to tell Excel. So if we just do our normal thing, enter or Control Enter, that's Excel thinks it's a regular formula, so it goes value error. You have to tell Excel, I am putting a special formula in the cell. This is an array formula. You have to hold Control Shift and Enter. Now we use Control Shift Enter to tell Excel this was an array formula, but look up here. The curly brackets are Excel telling you that it understood. Those curly brackets cannot be typed in. In fact, if you put it in edit mode, they go away. If you hit Enter, it's a value error, and there are no curly brackets. Control Shift Enter, curly brackets, array formula works. I'm going to drag this down, and sure enough, it retrieved the last value, right? No problem. Now, so trick, this is a pretty cool trick. Our 16th trick, we can use index and match together in array formula to look up the first non-blank. Now let's copy this. Actually, escape, click here, And we'll copy the whole cell, Control C, and I'm going to paste it right here. The 17th trick, we'll just see that index can handle arrays without Control-Shift-Enter. Now, wait a second. I thought we said we had to do Control-Shift-Enter. It all comes down to arguments. There's only a few functions that can handle arrays without Control-Shift-Enter. Index is one of them, but it's only if the thing is in the array argument. This is inside of match, and that lookup array can't handle arrays. But watch this. We're going to do something really tricky with just this little part right here, an index. I'm going to say index. Now the array right here is sitting in the array argument for index, which can handle arrays. We want to look index is a lookup array, right? But we want all the things, so no problem. Notice it's a one-way lookup. So I can type a comma. And because it's a one-way lookup, it's expecting the relative position here. But as we saw a couple examples ago, if we leave it blank, it returns all the items. So I simply close parentheses. That little thing right there is sitting, sure, it's sitting in the lookup array, but index will deliver the array to lookup array no problem, as if it was a normal range. But this, we can do that only because this argument accepts array. So watch, enter. No curly brackets. Drag it down, and sure enough, it works just fine. All right, our last example. Wow, this is going to be a doozy. These are how to use index for even more complicated array formulas. Our last example for index and match, we'll see how to extract records. So for example, we have a data set here, names and scores. The max is 99, and there's a count of 2. So I want to see the students there. If there were 3, it should show 3. If there was only 1, it should show 1. Now, extracting data, with filter, super easy to do. Do the filter, copy, paste. Same with advanced filter. However, lots of people like formulas because they update instantly. I'm going to Control Z, Z. So any data we put here, it just pops out the answer. User-friendly for people who are just entering raw data, right? All right. Now, I'm just going to show you one kind of quick example, maybe 2. And then I'm going to direct you some videos if you want to see more advanced formulas, because there are a lot of different types of formulas for extracting data that use index and match. I'm going to zoom in here. And I'm going to highlight this and hit delete. So in this situation, the first thing we need to do is ask for the max. So please show me the max. And it will tell me which one is the biggest. Then I need to count those. So I'll use count if. I'm going to say the range. Here's all the values, comma, what's the criteria? Well, it's the max. Right? And so there's 2 of them. Now we're going to build a formula using index and match to extract the student name. So obviously, this will be the array, and we'll get the row number from, or relative position from these numbers, somehow matching this against this. All right. Also, we're going to need to remember how the names showed up. Really, what was happening is when we had 2 names, these formulas were being hidden by showing a blank. So we're going to start off this formula with equals if. And we're going to use our formula incrementer that we saw a few examples ago. In that one, however, we went 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This one, we're going to want to go 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to say I'm sitting in C13. So C $13 colon C13. I've locked the 13, but not in the first one, but not the second one. That means as it copies down, it'll give me 1, 2, 3. Anytime that number is greater than this, and I'm going to hit the F4 key to lock it, then what do I want? The value, if true, is double quote for blank. Comma, the value of false, that's our index. Index, the array, well, that's pretty easy. That's always the values we want to potentially extract. I'm going to hit F4. Now, comma, the row number. And this example we're going to do here is very common. Anytime you have duplicates, right? So we're looking up 99, right? But anytime you have duplicates, you can't just use VLOOKUP or index. You have to do something pretty tricky because what? We have row numbers. Here we have 1, so the second relative position and the third. So when we copy this formula down, that row number needs to show first 2 and then 3. we can use the small function. Remember, we started with row 2 and then 3. We will give small in this array. By the way, that you can't put arrays in there. That's why sometimes the screen tips are confusing. But no problem. We're going to put some array in there that is going to give us the row numbers. And here's how we're going to do it. We're going to say if anything here, anything here, and I'm going to hit F4, is equal to 99. I'm going to hit the F4 key. That'll give us a string of trues and falses. If you highlight this and hit F9, it gives us a bunch of trues and falses. Because there's more than one, it's an array here. Control Z. That's the problem with hitting the F9 key. I just did 2 actions in a row, and now I can't undo it, so I have to go F4 equals this F4. Anytime we see a logical true there, what do I want? I want row numbers. The value of true is going to be row numbers. Now watch this. Row. Well, there's a row function. We saw rows with an S, but this is row, so it'll give us all the rows. But right now, it'll give us 3, 4, 5, F4. So I'm going to subtract row. And I'm going to lock that. But that gives us 3 minus 3, which is 0, so we add 1 back in. That's just a clever, robust way of always getting all of the relative positions. So F9, 1 to 8. Control Z. Now, which ones of those do we want? Control Z. Well, this little series of trues and falses will pick out only the 2 and the 3. So I'm going to look at my screen tip right here. Value of true. I don't need the value of false because it'll just dump false in, so close parentheses. And I'm definitely highlighting this and hitting the F9 key to see that beautiful. There's our 2 and 3. The rest are falses. Small, as we copy it down, we'll use the same number incrementer. It'll take the 2 first and then the 3. Control Z. I'm going to highlight this, comma. Come to the end here. Notice it's array, comma. There's the K. Control V for our number incrementer, the first, second, the smallest second, etc. Close parentheses on the small. That gets us back to row number. The small is dumping a row number. If I highlight this and hit F9, you can see it's 2. When it goes down 1 row, it'll deliver 3. That's the row number or the relative position. I don't need column number. Close parentheses. That is, the index is the value of false. Close parentheses. This is an array formula, that little thing right there. Because we gave it more than one true or false, it's an array. Control Shift Enter. And then I'm going to copy it down, and I'm going to test it. 99, and there it is. All right, now that is going vertical. That's the last formula we'll build here. Those will give you more practice on this type of formula. Down here, we're going to see a wild one. Down here is what we would have to build if we had one of the top 3 and multiple students. Here, it's just the max, right? This is a formula right here that will get rid of duplicates and sort the list. That's why down here it says Excel magic trick array formula to sort list and remove duplicates. That'll teach you how this formula works. But that is an awesome formula, of course, from the Mr. Excel message board. But Control Shift Enter. It will dynamically extract only one each of the items and sort them. Then we had to count them. How many 99s, how many 85s. And then this formula here. This formula has to use columns instead of rows because we're copying it this direction. And if you have 2010, the aggregate function can be used instead of small. 15 tells aggregate to do small. And aggregate is new in 2010, and it can handle arrays, albeit in a slightly different way, and not require Control Shift Enter. So this formula, there's no curly brackets. You copy it over and down. And if you want to learn about that video, right here, this link, or if you search for this at YouTube or Google or whatever, those videos will come up. Wow, that's a lot about index and match. All right, see you next trick.